Chapters 38 and 39 has been this dialogue that the Lord has now having with Job. And remember that we see the Lord reveals his power to Job in this, I guess you could say, one-sided conversation. But the Lord answers Job. And it says in verse 1 of chapter 38 that the Lord, answered Job out of the whirlwind. And I kind of focused on that for a moment yesterday and then a little bit this afternoon as I considered the passage. Because when you get into chapter 40, in verse 6, it says the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind again. And the idea behind this is this picture that the Lord was with Job. Just the picture that the Lord was with Job in the midst of his storm. And there was so much that Job had said about God being absent, if you will. A lot of things he said, and the Lord is going to kind of bring that up now here in chapter 39 as he's continuing on. But notice what we see here, that the Lord's response to not only Job, but also to his friends as they attempted to try to explain Job's suffering. Now, keep in mind that the Lord never explains to Job why he suffered. But the Lord brings up a really important thought for Job to consider. And he's carrying on and continuing on. He's asking Job a series of questions in saying in verses 4 through 7 of chapter 38, he says, where were you when I created, when I laid the foundations of the earth? And he spoke as as constructing a building, a master builder. Or where were you when I shut in the sea with doors? In verses 8 through 11. And the origins of the sea and the waters and the gathering of the waters. He's talking about creation, and then even the days and the morning and the sun and the control of the sun rising and going down. All of this to say, Job, where were you? Then he takes it a step further. Obviously, there's no answer for that. But then he says the depth of things, considering the ocean. Have you seen the bottom of the ocean? We know the answer is no. And Job not answering at all. I mean, how can you answer that? Because the answer is no. Do you understand how these things operate? Have you entered the treasury of the snow, or have you seen the treasury of hell? Do you know how these things come about? Even the direction of wind and waves and all these things. The answer is obviously no. Then he takes it a step further from Job's own remarks in chapter 9 and verse 9. He goes on to say, can you bind the cluster of Pleiades or loose the belt of Orion? And can you bring Mazzaroth in its season? He's talking about, the constellations and, the galaxies and all of these things. He says, do you know the ordinances of heaven? Can you set their dominion over the earth? So he's continuing these things, and what he's saying to Job is that man does not have control of these things. God does. When you look at passages like Psalm 104, it gives us this picture of the sovereignty of God. And I think we kind of articulated this the last time we were here in the text, that this is somewhat in Psalm 104, where the song, "This is my Father's world," kind of was taken from. It's talking about the providence of God. And then we took the story of Joseph and the providence of God in his life and how all these things happened to him, not because of anything he did, but because it was all a part of God's work. And then ultimately, in the end, the Lord worked it all out. And so it gives us this understanding that God is working behind the scenes and in the midst of things, even when we don't see it. And we want to see it. We want to see God move, and we want to see his hand in things. And sometimes it even challenges what we believe about God. Because maybe things ain't going the way that we would expect it. But this is the point that the Lord is highlighting to Job. You know, there are just things you don't understand, and it's not a bad thing. It's, you know, trying to understand his trial would be to understand God's work behind things. And, you know, that's something that a lot of us wrestle with. I know, because I wrestle with things like that. God, how are you going to work this out? And then the way I think it's going to work out, it doesn't. And then when God works it out after, it's like, man, I should have just kept my mouth shut. But none of you guys have ever been there, because you guys know more than me. Anyways, so look at what happens here. So he's continuing on with this, and the Lord is still speaking. Job is still listening. Job will break his silence because the Lord is inviting Job to answer. But these 2 chapters here, just for the sake of your own personal study, I believe are important for us to understand, because you know what I noticed in this is that God does not in any way begin to discuss Job's suffering with him. He's talking about a host of other things that perhaps, let me explain to you, Job never thought of in the midst of his trial. And that is the case a lot of times. And what God will do is, like in the case of chapters 38 and 39, you know, we start to realize that our little world and our little suffering is part of the bigger part, not but part of the bigger world, that there's more going on. And so it's kind of like that idea that we say, you know, when we're going through something, and then you say, oh, and then I talked to them, and boy, I thought I was going through it, right? And so that happens. And what we see is then we get that conviction, like, man, I should have just stayed quiet. But look at, so he goes on to say this in verse 1 of chapter 39. He says, do you know the time? Now, as I pondered this just for a moment this afternoon, I looked at this and I says, that's a good, question. Now, he's going to talk about, do you know the time when the wild mountain goats, don't worry, we'll get into animals right now, okay? But I just looked at these words, do you know the time? And this is a question that many of us have. I mean, this was something that even the disciples, right, were constantly asking Jesus. They were anxious for, hey, are you going to, you going to take this over now? That's really what they were asking him, right? Because they were expecting Jesus to be the one who would come and re-revolutionize that whole region, right? But Jesus was speaking in those terms. He was speaking in a kingdom that would take over. He was speaking in, this, because that's how his ministry started, right? John the Baptist said, the kingdom of God is at hand. So what does that mean? It's coming. And then Jesus comes on the scene, and then he's like, the kingdom of God is here. So right away, the disciples in their mind, they're like, well, we're part of this kingdom. And then you see the dialogue later on as Jesus was being crucified with Pontius Pilate, right? And everybody says you're a king. Are you the king of the Jews? He's like, you said it right. Are you saying that because you heard it? And, Pontius Pilate was just kind of like, well, is this what kings look like? They mocked Jesus even at that, right? But what did Jesus say? My kingdom is what? It's not of this world. And he said if it were, you guys would have been wiped out right now. I mean, pretty much that's what he said, right? But the whole idea was there is a kingdom, and it's far greater than any kingdom you can even imagine. There's a plan, and it's far greater than any plan you can imagine. Because when God does things, he goes big. When we do things, we limit ourselves. So let God do it. Amen? And it will come out good. I've learned to get out of the way. You know, because all straight Mickey Mouse things, man, you know. And then you look back and it's like, they're like, wow, God did that? You're like, yeah, kind of. You know, it's not, well, you know, but God does above and beyond. So this kingdom, listen to this, was something that the disciples anticipated. But Jesus spoke of a kingdom that was far greater, that to this day is yet to be established. It's established in the heart of the church because Christ is our king, right? And he has made us, according to Revelations 1:6, kings and priests unto his God. So there is that type of dynamic that's there. But the ultimate kingdom will culminate, as we talked this morning about, during the time of the millennial reign of Christ. Now, in the same way here, he's saying there are things, Job, that you just don't fully understand. And so far in chapter 38 and 41 verses, I mean, he just laid it out. Can you hunt the prey for the lion or satisfy the appetite of the young lions? Do you know when they're hungry? Do you know when they need to get fed? Do you know any of that? Or lurk in their lars to lie and wait? Who provide food for the raven when its young ones cry to God? And wander about for lack of food. You know, it's an interesting thing because you look at all of this and you see that I was just thinking about the raven in verse 41. And I says, you know, the raven is an unclean bird, right? It's like, don't eat it. But then God uses this unclean animal to provide sustenance for Elijah. Remember that? Down at the brook of Cherith. And for a year he was there, and the raven was bringing food to him. And so I always looked at that like, a raven? Why? You know, then you go back to the story there with Noah, right? And you see the account with the raven, and you see the account with the dove, and they're just not a good sight in the Bible. But anyways, even the raven the Lord provides for them. So the point that he's making is that, you know, there are things that we just don't understand that God created for a purpose. And was the purpose to create ravens to say that, oh, they're just unclean birds? I think the point that the Lord is bringing out here is everything has its purpose and its time. And you don't know it all. Are you okay with not knowing it all? I mean, some people are not. Boy, there's some people that think they know it all too. like Job's the younger buddy, Elihu. That guy, boy, he gave him an earful, didn't he? But look at this. So again, do you know the time? I guess another question would be, do you want to know the time? You know, the other day we were in a meeting here, and I don't know how this is set up, and this is nothing against the brother that does the keying for our building across the street, but there's certain doors that have one key to the top lock, the bolt, and then a different key to the bottom. So I was asked in the meeting, well, you're the pastor, don't you have the key? I says, no, I don't have the key. Why not? You should have the key to all the. I says, no. The least amount of keys I have, the better off I am, because then I'm not responsible for opening that door. So, you know I don't have the key, don't bother me. It's just like that, you know, kind of thing. And, oh, that's really good, you know. So I just get the one with all the keys and have them go open it for you. But do you want to know the time? Because there's something that comes with that. Could you even control that? The answer is obviously no, because he's saying, do you know the time when the wild mountain goats bear young? Like, Job's like, mountain goats? I don't even know. Some would say that here this is a type of mountain goat that on rare occasions because they hide when they bear their young. It's to this day, it's been a very rare occasion that this specific type of mountain goat that's being referred to here, that it's even been seen by human eyes as to giving birth to its offspring. So he's saying something that, no one knows the time. No one knows when it gives birth. Or can you mark when the deer gives birth? No. Can you number the months that they fulfill? So these are things that only God knows, and things that only God sees. And he's saying this, he's saying, Job, listen, these are things that are beyond, you probably never even thought about what goes on in the wild. Only God knows. And these are things that you don't, and all of it has its timing. And do you know the time when this takes place? No, you don't. You see, all these things are according to God's purpose and plan and his timing. And then you wonder, remember what Jesus said about worrying. We talked a little bit about this last week as we were closing out chapter 38. But what did he say? He says, don't worry about tomorrow. And he gives a couple of examples. Consider the sparrows. Consider the lily of the field, right? All of these things. He says, listen, God takes care of these things. They have their time. They have their seasons. This is all by God's design. Imagine if this responsibility or this timing was given to you. Would you be able to keep up and maintain? No. There are things that are out of your ability to have control over, and that's why God is God and you're not. That's why he is infinite and we're finite, because he is God. He's able to control these things. And notice that you never really consider that. When you're going through something, you don't consider God's ability to have sovereignty over the universe, and everything is still going in its order, day to day, year by year, month by month, all of these things flowing in their time, and God's in control of all of it, and he's not even breaking a sweat. So in one case, it's not that God is trying to, humiliate Job or make him feel any less. He's just saying, Job, understand that there are things that are just beyond your ability to control or even understand. What we can do is, if God ultimately is in control, then let him be in control, even in the midst of your circumstance and situation. Can you number the months that they fulfill, or do you know the time when they bear their young? They bow down, they bring forth their young, they deliver their offspring, their young ones are healthy, they grow strong with grain, they depart and do not return to them. Who set the wild donkey free? Who loosed the bonds of the onager? Now this type of animal here, some would say are pretty much kind of like, obsolete, if you will. But this was a massive type of beast that could not be tamed. It rejected and resisted being domesticated. So the impossibilities of this one, even of itself, whose look at what he says here, whose home I have made the wilderness. In other words, God, as he made it. So God is in control of even this type of uncontrollable, not tamed by man, but in essence, it served its purpose, tamed by God. I mean, we've seen God do some amazing things with animals, right? I mean, in the Bible. So you see God's control, and obviously Job doesn't have these stories of the Bible like we do, but, Jonah and the whale, and, Balaam and, the donkey. Boy. But you see this whole picture here that he's saying here, whose home I have made the wilderness, and the barren land its dwelling place. And some would say this type of wild donkey, probably the barren land in reference here, could very well be the Dead Sea. He scorns the tumult of the city. He does not heed the shouts of the driver. In other words, the sound of the city, those are things that did not appeal. They're, out in the middle of nowhere. He does not heed the shouts of the driver. The range of the mountains is his pasture. In other words, he's like, You know, these are beyond your, have you ever even seen one, Job? Put it that way. They're beyond his ability to see. And he searches after every green thing. Will the wild ox be willing to serve you? Can you tame this one who is determined to not be tamed by you? Can you bind the wild ox in the furrow with the ropes, or will he plow the valleys behind you? Will you trust him because his strength is great, or will you leave your labor to him? Or will you trust him to bring home your grain and gather it to your threshing floor? The whole idea here is there's no way that Job can tame this animal. But God has created every single one of these to serve their purpose. And maybe these are things that Job just never considered. Maybe there are things that Job just didn't really stop and contemplate. I mean, who's really thinking about a wild donkey when you've lost everything? Who's thinking about, you know, where they're going to find, like, where's a wild donkey going to eat? Like, I'm not thinking about wild donkeys, you know, but what God is doing is he's saying, listen, there's more to this than just you. And I think that's a healthy thing to understand. It does us good. He goes from, you know, a donkey and to a mountain goat, from a wild ox now to birds. And he says here in verse 13, he says, the wings of the ostrich wave proudly. But are her wings and pinions like the kindly storks? Well, obviously not. I mean, really think about it. An ostrich is a pretty big animal, man. It's a big bird, you know. But I mean, ostrich have wings, but they don't fly. Some of you are like, really? No, they don't fly. But you know what they do with their wings? If you've ever seen them run, their wings actually, they extend their wings when they run. It actually balances them. Because they get about, from what I understand, I think they said about 5 feet, 6 feet, sometimes even because of their neck, that's where all their height is, up to 7, 8 feet. And they're massive birds, several hundred pounds. And I think the verdict is still out on this, but there has been this, you know, back and forth that an ostrich can outrun a horse by 40 miles an hour. Isn't that something? You're like, ostrich, the new cool animal. I'm going to get tattooed on me. Anyways. So the wings of the ostrich wave proudly. Well, indeed. But then again, you look at this and you say, wings are to help you fly. Why did God create wings for the ostrich? Look at what else it says. For she leaves her eggs on the ground. So explain how the ostrich has wings and doesn't fly, and how she leaves her eggs on the ground and warms them in the dust. She forgets that a foot may crush them, careless in how she cares for her eggs. Or that a wild beast may break them. She treats her young harshly, as though they were not hers. Her labor is in vain, without concern. And so this carelessness as to, you know, what is the purpose? Because God deprived her of wisdom. I think this is a good reminder that God is the one who gives wisdom to his creation. That God is the giver of wisdom. You want wisdom in a certain circumstance or situation? James says, we have not because we ask not. And if you seek wisdom from the Lord, the Bible says he will give it to you. But I mean, really think about who's thinking about an ostrich in the midst of a trial. And did not endow her with understanding when she lifts herself on high. She scorns the horse and its rider. So look at this picture here. So in a sense, you could say that, you know, God could have created the ostrich a little bit more different. He could have actually gave her a little bit more wisdom, and maybe there would be more productivity and caring for her eggs, and there would be, but there's a reason behind everything. So in other words, I just want to throw this out there. I was kind of thinking about this as I was kind of thinking of a contrast to give. You know, let's think of stress. Anybody ever been stressed out here? Okay, so stress is it's an interesting dynamic. But did you know that the human body, when created by God, was not created to bear stress? God created us perfect. So stress in and of itself could not affect creation in its pure sense before the fall, because man was created perfect. The moment sin entered the world, stress became the greatest enemy to man. And I've shared this story before, but I think it's noteworthy, you know, that stress can cause a lot of damage. It could even cause a rare form of cancer, and you can die from it. And I have a friend whose father passed away from stress, and the stress caused cancer in him. Nothing else but the stress. And he died from a rare form of cancer that was caused by stress. He says, how does that happen? And, you know, as we got, you know, obviously I had already had this thought that, you know, of course stress is not good, but we got into talking to this, me and him, and I says, you know, that's just an interesting thing. I mean, where does it go from worrying too much and then becoming stress? Because there are times I think about things a lot, and you get that pain in your, nobody gets the pain in the chest? Some of you are like, dude, that's heartburn, bro. Get some Tums. Get some Tums, hook yourself up. But, yeah, it does something to you. You lose sleep. Like, it'll wake you up, right? You don't want to eat. And, you know, it breaks the body down. It's oppressive. And so all of this to say that, you know, God made us not to bear stress. And so you say, then what do we do then? If we were created to be somewhat like, hey, well, we're not to bear stress. Well, this is why at times when we talk, me and you or someone here, one of our leaders, we tell you when you're going through something, it's not your burden to carry. What we're saying is stress was not to be you as the intended purpose. Stress is to be dealt with by God's sovereignty, if I could even put it that way. That let God take control of that. But that's where the fight comes in, right? Because to turn it over would mean to really let it go. And it seems like we're like in love with stress, even though we don't want to be. But the Lord can deal with stresses. You know, this is what Jesus said. Remember when he says, come unto me, all you who are tired and weary and heavy laden, and all you who are tired and weary. And Jesus says, take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And he says, and there you'll find rest for your souls. And this is that whole thing of allowing the Lord to take care of those things in your life. It doesn't mean that problems are going to go away, because we're going to have problems, right? You know, people, there was this false teaching for years where people would say, come to Jesus and all your problems would go away. Literally there was, and there still is today. When I sit in those churches and I hear these people saying that, I'm just like, you are lying to them. That's not even the gospel. So I don't even know if they're truly, I'm sorry, but I have to go this far to say, I don't even know if their conversion is true, because they're not given truth. They're given man's wisdom. They're given what this individual hopes their walk to be like, but you can't put that on someone. You just got to tell them, hey, the purpose is to come so that your sins can be forgiven. Though there might be adversity, though there might be trial, this time around, you're not going to go through it alone. The Lord will be with you. And isn't that like a greater thing to know that the Lord is with you in the midst of it? And I think all of us here tonight have experienced that. We've been through some stuff without the Lord, right? And then we came to faith and we've gone through some stuff, and then it's different. Especially when you grow in the Lord. And you still feel the pain of the trial and the stress, but there's something there that just doesn't let you go beyond that. Whereas before you would have went there, right? But anyways, God gives us what we need to get through any stressful thing. And God has created his creation to serve a purpose. And even in the midst of your stress, and you, who you are, created in the image of God, were created for a purpose. And even Job's suffering has a purpose. Its ultimate end is good. But God needs to walk Job around the block a little bit. And say, Job, there's other things you need to consider. Have you given the horse strength? Horses are some amazing animals. Now, you can kind of say I like horses. I've been known to ride a horse or two. That's why I'm bow-legged. I didn't come from the cholo stance. That was, I was in a placement on vacation as a juvenile and was in a boys' ranch for about a year. It was a ranch. It was a real ranch. We had horses there and all kinds of animals, man. Barbados, I don't know, sheep and goats and chickens and rabbits and a bunch of dogs and horses. So they used to go to the auction, and we used to have to buy horses. Horses are big. And the horse, when I would look at the horse, I'd say, man, this is a pretty big animal, right? And they would say, you're gonna have to get on it. You're gonna have to ride it. I says, I ain't getting on that thing, man. And then they go around and we go to the auction. This was, I forget the area that we were at, but anyways, they would go around and they would kind of take the animal around, and they would, people would bid on it, and so they would, purchase a horse, whatever the case might be. And then they says, you guys got to get a horse, and they said, okay. So they brought a pony out, and it was blind in one eye. So I said, I'm gonna bid on that one. I'll ride that thing. Well, we bid on it. We didn't get it though, but we got stuck with the horse, the big one. And I'll never forget the strength on those things, man. And so, thank God I never got thrown off a horse, never jumped off, never. But I learned how to ride, and them things got some power. And he says, have you given the horse strength? Have you clothed his neck with thunder or his mane? Can you frighten him like a locust? Obviously you can't. He's talking about a war horse here, different than your just ordinary horse, but a horse that is ready for battle, a horse that is truly ready to go at the moment that it's commanded to go. Consider the power of this type of animal. His majestic snorting strikes terror. His paws in the valley and rejoices. He paws in the valley and rejoices in his strength. He gallops into the clash of arms. He mocks at fear and is not frightened, nor does he turn back from the sword. Ready for battle. The quiver rattles against him, the glittering spear and javelin. He devours the distance with fierceness and rage. Nor does he come to a halt because the trumpet has sounded. In other words, nothing stops him as he's ready for battle. At the blast of the trumpet, he says, aha. He smells the battle from afar, the thunder of captains and shouting. Nothing deters the horse or his strength as he's prepared for battle. Why? Because that's his purpose. Did you give the horse that strength? See, a lot of this is within the nature. If you notice some of the things that he's talking about in these animals, a lot of this is part of their nature. It's what they do. Does the Listen to what he's saying. Spread its wings toward the south. Do you tell the hawk when to migrate? Birds when to fly? Does the eagle mount up at your command and make its nest on high? Are you the one that told the eagle to put its nest where it does? If you notice that in the clefts of these rocks, right? You'll see some imagery sometimes of Alaska and some cameras, in these, high places. And they'll say, look, there's an eagle up there with its nest. And it's like, this is where, this eagle is, has its nest up there. And you think, because, they can fly higher. They see a lot more sharper. He goes on to say here, and the rock, it dwells and resides on the crag of the rock and the stronghold. From there it spies out the prey. Its eyes observe from afar off. This is God-given ability, even to this very bird. And he's causing him to consider, have you just stopped and just looked at the creation of the Lord? Its young ones suck up blood, and where the slain are, there it is. This is a lot of information that perhaps some of it is even news to Job, because it's maybe things he didn't consider. And for a moment, as he's listening to God, notice too that what the Lord is talking about, you would think, man, maybe it should have been, you should have threw some verses in there, right? No, this is God speaking. He is Scripture. He is God. And he's saying, Job, do you understand that in all these things, there has been my sovereignty and my control, and everything has gone the way I've intended it to go. And let me throw this to you guys. Perhaps, Job, have you considered that this trial is something that I've allowed and intended to go the way that it's gone for you? Moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, shall the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Okay, now it's getting personal. He's taken the attention away from the animals and all this. Now he's talking about the one who contends. Who is the one that contends? Who is it? Job. You're right. He did. Chapter 10, verses 1 and 2. Chapter 23, verse 6. And so as Job's pondering all this, the Lord is saying, can you answer these things? The answer is no. And you want to contend with me? First, explain to me how the eagle knows where to put its nest. When you can explain that to me, or where the horse gets his strength, when you fully understand the ways of the hawk and when it knows to migrate, or the mountain goat, when the timing of that goat and or the deer gives birth, or that wild donkey behind the hills beyond where you can see where it gets its food, when you can answer those questions, then contend with me. But where were you when I put the stars in their place? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Where were you when I created the waters and the rivers and the oceans to flow in the dynamic in which they flow? Where were you as each season comes about and it comes and goes, and the earth is filled with the goodness of God? Where are you in the midst of the providence of God? Boy, that's pretty heavy, isn't it? And he's saying, so do you still want to contend with me? Remember, Job says, if I could just plead my case before God, oh boy, do you really want to do that? Do you really believe you have something to say? And you know what? There are people who really carry that attitude. And it's done out of ignorance. It's done out of ignorance. Ignorance doesn't mean stupidity. It just means without knowledge. I've had people tell me, I'm mad at God. Are you kidding me? I don't think there's ever been a time that I've been mad at God. I've been mad at myself. Or they say something as stupid as this, well, I'll just take this up with God. I got to deal with this with God. Wow. That's like the dumbest thing you can say. Seriously, God forgive me. Sometimes I feel like just telling them, you know what? I don't think you know the Lord, man. To have that much arrogance, to talk like you confidently know God. Well, I'll just have to take that up with God. My goodness. That is the dumbest thing to say. And this is what the Lord is saying to Job. He's saying, listen, Job, you sure you want to go that route? He who rebukes God, let him answer it. Who rebukes God? God used his creation to answer Job's heart. You know that God will do that sometimes. God used his creation to answer his heart. God does, Job probably wanted the straight answer, right? Just tell me why. And God's like, have you considered my creation? It's like, God, are we going to go there? Oh, we're going to go there. And as he started to speak and begin to explain, Job's kind of like, wow, I don't even want to ask no more. Because, this walk that we just took caused me to realize you're everything and I'm nothing. And it's only by your grace that I'm even still standing in the midst of this trial and this adversity. And there's that much more of an appreciation for God carrying you and sustaining you in the midst of it all, right? Here it is. Everybody say, here it is. You guys ready? Then Job answered the Lord. When I read that, I did one of these ones like, hey. I put my hand over it. I'm like, do I even want to read what's coming next? I was like, boy, okay, here we go. Behold. Behold means listen up. Now, not in this arrogant way. He's making an announcement, and here are the next 3 words. You ready for this? Behold, I am vile. Why did he say that? Let me propose a thought to you that came to me while I was driving in this evening. God used his creation to answer Job's heart, and Job answered in comparison to the greatness of God. Job came in this thing saying, if I could plead my case and present this before God, I'm gonna do it. Oh, where's my mediator? Remember the whole thing that Job went through, right? And now that God just laid it all out. I am sovereign. I am providential. And God used his creation that Job could not answer on. And in light of that, in these 2 chapters, God reminded Job of a couple of things and reminds us of a couple of things. You ready for this? That God remains God and Job remains man. You are God and I'm man. You see the word there, vile? We think of something awful, right? But the word in the original language, in the Hebrew language, doesn't mean that. It means light, of no weight. In other words, I have nothing to come to bring to you. I am lowly. I am brought low. And that should always be our position before the Lord. I think that's a good word there. You don't think so? I do. What shall I answer you? I lay my hands over my mouth. That's what he's saying. Once I have spoken, but I will not answer. Yes, twice, but I will proceed no further. You see, in Job chapter 31, in verses 35 through 37, Job, in a sense, demanded to be brought to God's court, and God says, well, here you are. Job repents of questioning God's justice, and he's speechless before God. And he goes on to say this. I just want to give you guys this picture, because when I was thinking about this, I was considering, some of what Job was kind of explaining, in his circumstance and in his situation and all that had transpired in his life. And Job kind of looked at himself in this way and in this term. And Job talked about that which he feared the most has happened to him. He couldn't explain all that took place. But he best tried to describe his situation. And he says, I have no answer other than to trust the Lord. His trust in the Lord was truly a test. Truly a test. And anyone else could have easily failed miserably, but Job didn't. Once I have spoken, but I will not answer. Yes, twice, but I will proceed no further. And then the Bible says the Lord answered out of the whirlwind. Notice that. This is a picture of the storm. The Lord was with Job throughout the entirety of the storm and is still with Job even now. And I love what he says. Now prepare yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. God is still God, and Job is still a man. You're a man, I'm going to talk to you like a man. Sometimes that's just how it has to be, right? Would you indeed annul or nullify my judgment? I mean, really think about that. Would you condemn me that you may be justified? Wow. That's a pretty, Job, did you really want to go there? Did you really want to make me out to look bad so that you could look good? That you're not deserving of any of this and that it's just all my fault, like people like to blame God for everything? You guys ever met anybody like that? It's all God's fault. Have you an arm like God, or can you thunder with a voice like his? Then adorn yourself with majesty and splendor and array yourself with glory and beauty. Disperse the rage of your wrath. Listen to this, guys. That's like that whole thing. Hey, I just got to deal with this with God. This is a word to those ones that do that. Would you indeed nullify my judgments? Would you condemn me that you may be justified? Wow. Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low. Tread down the wicked in their place. Hide them in the dust together. Bind their faces in hidden darkness. Then I will also confess to you that your own right hand can save you. If you can do this. But he can't, okay? But he's just saying, who can come and declare these things to me? Kind of like that Isaiah passage. There is no other God beside me. Who can declare it? Who can speak those things of old and former things and future things, and they come to pass? Who can do it? None can. God challenges Job. There's two figures that we're going to see in verses 15 and into chapter 41. We don't have time to look at those tonight. But I wanted to take the time in our next study to really study these from their physical appearance, but also their spiritual significance. Because remember, the book of Job is it's a book of spiritual warfare. And he's giving him some keys to understanding that when we're in the midst of warfare and trial and adversity, God's in control. He'll speak in the midst of the storm. And just like he is sovereign and completely in control with all the things that take place in the world that we see, he's even in control in the midst of your circumstance, even when you don't feel him near. And he speaks of these two great animals that he created. It's from the physical sense, dinosaurs. And then from its spiritual sense, these massive works of darkness that are constantly at war. And it's a struggle. And he presents warfare as something that you and I are no match for, that you need him. Because we cannot tame the works of darkness. It's a force to be reckoned with. But we come on the basis of the one who is sovereign, the one who is providential, and the one who's still in control even in the midst of your circumstance. Amen?